asked me, he goes, "Why would you do this sermon and just about Satan?" And the whole, it was just how do we protect ourselves? And it's really stuck with me for some reason. What I wasn't thinking about was protecting my family. Because when I'm protecting us, my family, it keeps the bad wet things away from the little guy here. You know, it's a whole lot better for him to be here than at the skate park, you know, where the kids are doing bad stuff. It's a whole lot better for him, for all of us. If we're in a mental state, it's a whole lot better. And a lot of this has to do with, you know, that call just really got to me. And when Pastor Knox asked me to do this again, this is what really stood out to me. And how are we going to protect ourselves? I know God has all the answers. My problem is I'm not really good at listening. I'm really good at figuring things out, making things work, and I'm constantly doing things. Before I went to work for a company called Southwest Energy for about 10 years, I was doing a job here in town that I absolutely hated it. It was hard physical. It was bad on me. I was working stupid hours, wasn't making nearly enough money. And Southwest Energy had called me and said, "We'd like to interview you. We saw your resume." I said, "Fantastic." So I went in. I mean, I talked to 5 different people. Each one of them bought me lunch, and we went out to different places. I was being wined and dined a little bit. So this is great. And I left, and it was silent. There wasn't a word said, no phone call, no letter, no nothing. I thought, well, that was fun, you know, now what? Well, about a month and a half later, I was in town, and I was aggravated, and I had my phone out, and I was looking at something, and I just sitting there praying. I said, "Okay, God, you want me to go to Nevada? Fine. You want me to go to Idaho? Fine. I don't care where you want me to, you know, but this is it. I am done with what I'm doing. Okay, you figure it out." And I threw the phone down, and it rang. I was like, uh-oh. You know, I didn't really want to look at it because I wasn't real sure, you know, for that moment. And finally I answered it, and it was Southwest Energy, and they were offering me almost twice what I was making, lots of benefits. And I thought, God, what a way to get out of a hole. And this is, you know, but it took me going to the point with, okay, you're so bright, you figured out. What I was saying is, I'm not so bright, now you got to figure this out. And this armor, I think, that we need to put on is to help us get rid of all the static around us, all the garbage around us, to where we can actually listen to what God's got to tell us. Because the people in this room are leaders. Let's face it, you're leaders of your family, leaders of the church, your leaders where you work at, where, you know, the people you're around. We're the people that people look to. You know, I'm a supervisor or manager, so people look to me and they've got questions that they really need answered. You know, I know you guys got people calling you all the time going, "Hey, you know, what's the answer to this problem?" And we've got to be, like right now, got to have those answers. Whether it's a parent, you know, the kids asking us, and it doesn't. Sometimes it's the older kids that are calling us that have the tougher questions even. And we've got to have that. Okay, let me have a little inspiration. Okay, what's the right answer for this problem? And I think that's where we spent a lot of time trying to figure out. So with this, part of this message was, it's kind of 2-part. One is to figure out what the problem is, and the other part is, how do we use it? So, you know, as mom and dads walk by something, it becomes acceptable. As a supervisor, if I walk by something, it's acceptable. And with all of us, if we're walking by something, people around us, look, as Christians, the stuff it's okay. You know, if we're cussing all the time, oh, the Christians cuss all the time. You know, and it's not too hard to connect those dots that they start saying, wait a minute, if the Christians can do it, why don't we do it? On the other side of that is, if they start seeing the Christians doing things right and not doing those things, they're kind of watching that, because they are watching us. there was several years ago, there was a couple that, them and their family, they were actually our next door neighbors, because we lived in when me and my wife met, 18, 19 years ago, it was me and my two boys, and we found a trailer to rent, all 900 square feet of it. You know, we had the 2 bricks, piece of wood, and a TV on top of it, lawn chairs out, you know. Opened up the refrigerator. It was a refrigerator, because there wasn't nothing in there. You know, we were just getting by. She ended up moving in next door, yeah, with a friend of hers. I always said that she's the girl next door, and I'm just lazy. That's all the farther I was going. So, but the way we got together and just everything worked right, we ended up coming to the church, and it just fit, and our lives just changed dramatically. But there was a couple that we got to come to live next door to us, and they were that couple that if it could go wrong, it went wrong with them. They had drug issues, they had kids that they lost and got back, and you know, it was always a mess with them. And we got them to come a few times, and they ended up moving. We lost track of them. But somebody saw them a couple of years later, and they asked the friend of ours a question. And this question has bugged me ever since. They asked how we were doing, and they told them, no, they're fine, they're still in church. And then the next question she asked was, are they still strong? And it took me a little bit. Are they still strong? You know, are we still did we fall by the side, or are we still going to church? Did we fall down, or did we stay tough enough to stay in church? Did we fall? You know, did we leave the Christian way? And I don't know why that has bugged me so much over the years, but I think that's probably helped keep me coming back all the time. That's just something that has really played on me a lot. And there's how to use that as a spiritual safety is what is really worth that little phrase. Are they still strong? Well, how do we stay strong? I mean, you gotta, if you're a weightlifter, to stay strong, you gotta keep lifting weights. If you're gonna be healthy, you gotta eat right to stay strong. Well, the way I look at it, we're sitting here eating right. You know, this is the granola dinner. You know, this is all the good food that we're eating. That's how I kind of look at all this. So it's a spiritual safety. But as Christians, we're always in that danger zone. You know, what's going to make us weak and fall out of the side? What's that thing that's like, you know what? He said the wrong thing, and I'm not coming back. I am done. And I've seen a lot of Christians that went to church, boy, they were all fired up, and then they were just gone. And usually it was, well, somebody said something. I've worked with a lot of people that, especially when I worked in blasting, we had drillers. Drillers would work by themselves for 12 hours at a time. And one other thing, when you work long periods of time like that by yourself, your mind starts to work on it. I saw guys that were coming off a drill after the end of the shift, and they were ready to get a divorce. They couldn't stand their wife. They're jumping. And well, what is the matter? Well, she put peanut butter only on one side of the bread, you know. But they let that little bit work on it. And I think if we let things get to us, you know, well, he said that thing, and by the time it's done, it's this big. And that's what we're trying to work on, to make sure that we don't let those things blow out. And that's where this protection comes in. As a Christian, we're in a danger zone. Who's fighting us? The devil's fighting us, right? That's a pretty good opponent to be taken on. But he ain't nothing compared to what we do. The way I look at it, I am by far my worst enemy. The devil ain't got nothing on it. If it's going to be a mess up, it's going to be coming from me doing it. There's very little he's going to do compared to how much I can do to myself. And I got to pay attention to those. It's the, like I said, the stuff we walk by, and it's okay. Well, we're watching TV, and you know they're doing bad things on TV. It's only TV. Don't worry about it. You know, and then the kids are watching, so it must be okay to watch. You know, It's the, walked out of the store, oh, I forgot to pay for that. Oh, that's no big deal. And the kids are watching. You know, they're watching a lot of the stuff we're doing. And other people are watching. And then we have to watch ourselves because pretty soon that becomes normal. And once you make something normal, it's acceptable. That's why I say when the things we walk by become acceptable to other people. As a supervisor, when you walk by something, it's okay. Well, it's okay, the boss did it. And that's what we gotta work on. The devil's real subtle. I worked with explosives for a long time, and we call them misfires. That's where the whole shot went off, but one explosive didn't go off. And it would just be hanging there waiting for somebody to get in the wrong place and blow up and to kill people. And to me, that's where a lot of the stuff is. It's those hidden dangers. It's those things that we're not going to see that we can run into. 2 Timothy 2:6 says, and that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who is taken captive by him and his will. And it says the devil's walking among us. If you stop and think about it, how many evil things have you seen? Just turn the news on. You've got this craziness going on over in Europe. It's looking like it could put us into World War III in about half a second. You got China wanting to take us out. You got all these people wanting to take us out, but yet, you know that China is one of the fastest growing Christian countries in the world, and they can't even say God in their country. They have to say friend, and they can't have any open meetings, and they're cracking down on that stuff. But yet, more Christians are there than anybody would ever imagine. So, this spiritual safety is how do we keep the evil stuff away from us? You know, that snare of the devil. What are those easy snares? It's, you know, like I work with a lot of different people. It might be some girl at work who likes to flirt. You know, it could be an easy snare for somebody. If we're staying strong, there's no question. It could be, you know, something even more subtle that we don't even realize. It's like I said, the TV. You start watching things on there. A lot of times they say that these kids that go out and do drive-by shootings, what do? They crank that real nasty, hard music going. They do that for a few times, drive around for an hour or so. They're ready to kill people. I would be too if I had to listen to that, you know? So we have our flesh against us too. That's the easy one. The devil's, he's tougher. He's going to be a little bit slimer to get hold of. But the flesh part, it's pretty easy. Got it, you know. It's that easy. We know what we can do. And it's constant. I see things all the time that I look at. Like Brother Mickey and I were talking about when I was younger, you know, we partied. You know, we were, you know, coming from a small town. It was heavy drinking. And I think of all, and every once in a while, I'm like, man, cold beer would just, no, it would taste like vinegar. No, it wouldn't, you know. Or I'll smell a cigar once in a while. No, I don't want that. But just for that second, your memory comes back, and it's like it's reaching out. Look, come on back, you know, come on back. We're going to get you this time. And I think of how many people I've seen. You know, I'm driving around Tucson. It's horrible. You see the people on the street everywhere. You know, not a single one of them got out of high school going, okay, doctor, lawyer, drug addict. I think I'll do the drug addict. You know, they started out with, my friend here, he smoked a little marijuana, and he said it's no big deal. You know, just have a little hit of that. And then the next thing is, hey, this pill is going to make you feel really smart. You're going to feel good, or it's going to make you feel really good, or your back's hurting, take one of these. And next thing you know, I've seen really good people and have their lives destroyed because they didn't keep that armor around them. They didn't keep things at arm's length. That's what everybody tells me. Well, marijuana is just a recreational drug. It's not. It's not like they're doing cocaine or something. It's just, no. It's the start. It's the beginning.
Right.
And if you cut something off in the beginning, it doesn't keep going. It's a snare of the devil. In 2 Timothy in 2:26, that's what it's talking about, is that how important it is to watch out that you're going through a landmine and you don't want to step on the wrong thing. There's all these little traps that we have. And with our flesh against us, it's like a miner who knows he should wear his respirator to protect his lungs, but it's no big deal. It's just a little dust. And next thing you know, 20 years later, he's got cancer, he's got silicosis. There's all these different diseases because of long-term stuff. Now, I worked underground, and we hated the guys that wore earplugs. It's very extremely loud at times. But the problem was the guys that take their earplugs out and they throw them down, and they go down the drainage ditch. Next thing they know, they get down to a pump and they clog the pumps up. Well, that's great. Think about your underground. All of a sudden, the water is this deep. You got to wade down into the water, and there's a pump down there. You got to reach down underneath this pump and try to get the stuff out of it. And then there's everything imaginable in that water. And so we hated it. But it's okay. We were safe. We would take toilet paper and we would put it in our ears because that's got some kind of OSHA certification, right? We thought we were doing all the right things. The problem was we were just fooling ourselves. We weren't actually doing the right thing. A lot of times we're not really watching TV. It's just stuff that's on. Every show is bad now. I get so aggravated. My wife be watching some show, and next thing you know, there's two guys together, two girls. I was like, I can't do it. It just drives me crazy. They want to do it fine, but they're not doing it on my TV. So, there's little things, but nobody started out that way. What was it? The Lucille Ball show years ago was the first time that a husband and wife were even shown in the same bed together. Yet we've come all this way. But how do we protect ourselves from those little things that keep adding up and keep adding up? Silica is a really bad thing in mining because a little bit of silica doesn't hurt you. A little bit of silica day after day after day after day after day will actually get in your lungs and cause all kinds of problems, cancers and stuff. And like with the hearing stuff, when I teach an MSHA class, the mine safety and health classes we have to do, one of the questions I always ask the young guys is, do you hear that like super high pitched ringing right now? That real high, do you hear that? And they're like, I don't hear anything. Well, I do. I get to hear it 24/7, day in, day out, and it never goes away. It's a ringing in my ears because I used to work around jacklegs and all kinds of underground haul trucks and stuff. I get to hear that noise all the time. And it drives people crazy if you let it. Like now I'm talking about it, it gets louder because I'm thinking about it. I always say that the loudest thing I can do is be in a quiet room because that's all I hear is that ringing. I know you got mechanics that definitely are that way. Galatians 5:17, for the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that ye cannot do the things that you would. It means we can't do what we're supposed to and still want these other things. So how do you turn your mind to start thinking about doing the right things rather than the wrong things? And I think a lot of it is being here does it for me. When I miss a couple of weeks of church, I can tell my mind is already, it's starting to wander off on other paths. But when I'm here, it just, like it brings things back down, it settles me down, it calms me down. Some of the most calm times I have is sitting in church. Because other than today, I don't have to do anything. I can sit there, I can absorb something, I can enjoy it. It's about once every 3 years I'll do something where I just turn off. And I'm like sitting on a bank of a few years ago, we were up in the White Mountains, and I went out, sit by the lake, and took the bait off the hook and threw it out in the lake, and just sit there under the chair and let it sprain on me. And just absolutely turned off for a little while. And if I could do that every day, I'd be a happy camper. But, you know, it's that, how do we stay focused around protecting ourselves, not letting things like stress get to us? You know, has anybody got stress in their life? How many people have broken teeth because they're just doing this half the time? But when it talks about the flesh being contrary to what the Spirit is, you know, we want to do the right things, but it's not always the easiest thing. I've had a lot of safety guys that work for me that I tell them, you got to go talk to somebody when they're doing something wrong. They're going to hurt them, so you got to stop. Yeah, but, you know, he's an old man. He's done this for a long time. Yeah, but he's going to get hurt. He's going to argue with me. Yeah, he probably will. And when you finally get to the point where it works, they start realizing that, hey, you know, there's a way to approach him. But like one guy, I heard a speaker talk one time, and he says, approach somebody like this. Hey, would you mind if I looked out for you for a minute? Who's going to be dumb enough to say, you ain't looking out for me? So, you know, the same thing with us asking somebody, are you saved? If we walk up and by golly, you're going to go to hell, and that's the way it is, and this is what's going to be, what's their response going to be? You know, they're going to back up, close the door, lock it. But if we walk in as soft and gentle and say, hey, we're here to help you. We're not here to do anything. I don't want anything. We're just here to help. And I think that attitude towards people helps. It also keeps us honest. When we're really trying to get to the point where we want to convince somebody to become a Christian, we've got to be a little bit humble. Because you're not saying you need to follow me, because following me is going to take you down a pretty dark path somewhere. If you follow God, you're going to follow the right path. You're going to do all the right things if you follow God. We got the whole world against us. Think about how many people right now hate us because we're sitting in church. And let's talk about the whole world. You got basically probably 2/3 of the world can't stand the fact that we're doing this. How many people, I remember hearing a story about, there was I forget what the magazine was, or a newspaper they used to put out, Martyrs something, I can't remember what the whole name of it was.
Voice of Martyrs.
Voice of Martyrs, yeah. They're reading about a little girl, I think it was in Lebanon, and to go to church, she would run through the streets and there would be bullets hitting all the way around her. And I'm thinking, yeah, and I can't get up on Sunday afternoon and go to church again. But nobody shot at me. She believes in God. And she might just spread that message. And then you hear the message, how many of these pastors that are overseas, especially in Africa and places like that, horrible things happen to them just because they're trying to do something good. So how hard is it for us to go to your neighbor or the guy down the street or somebody you work with and say, hey, I want to talk to you for a minute. I'm concerned about you. I want to do something for you. And most people will take it right. Now, they used to do some soul winning out in Neighbor Valley. And one guy turned around and goes, look, I'm a Satanist. Nice knowing you, but that's not the guy we're going to have a discussion with. We'll move on to the next one. But we were there to offer it anyways. So, like in a mine site, there's a lot of things that are dangerous to a miner. There's explosives, there's trucks moving, there's vehicles moving, gases, cave-ins, darkness, falls on things. Everything is working against a miner that way, just like it is a Christian. Galatians 4:3, even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. If you think of it that way, when we're down in, I heard somebody say something about this isn't our home. This is where we're just kind of visiting for a while until we get to go home. And if you think of it as that, it seems like a pretty good idea. We do the best we can here, and then we get to go home to where we belong. I always wanted to put the sign out front that said free mansion to see how many people would come. So, you know, if you look at it like we're children at a certain point, learning how to be Christians, everybody has got a path that they learn how to be a Christian. And you start out with, you know, the little guys here, they're coloring things. Then pretty soon they're starting to recite different things. And then pretty soon they're believing what they're hearing. And they're understanding what they're hearing. And eventually you get to where you're doing a lot more. I can't remember which evangelist it was, but it was one that was pretty famous. It wasn't Billy Graham, but it was another one that was, matter of fact, it was the guy that led Billy Graham to be a Christian. When he died, and this guy was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, thousands and thousands of people became Christians because of it. Then when he died, he said, "I wish I could have done more." You know, I can't remember that.
Bill Mooney.
Mooney, yeah, that's it, Mooney, yeah. And he said, I wish I could have done more. You know, you think, God, here's a guy that did all that. That's pretty amazing, but he wanted to do more. And I think if we get that, well, I wish I could do more, and keep that in mind, and every time we go to talk to somebody about becoming a Christian, that's that little bit of armor around us, because nobody wants to really go up and talk to somebody about something that's uncomfortable. It's kind of like going up to them and go, "Look, your shoes are really ugly." You know, nobody wants to make that, I'm just trying to help you out here. I just don't want you to go out in public. Your wife do tell you things like, "Yeah, you're not wearing that, are you?" "Colorblind, you bet." You know? There's a lot of things she tells me. Those don't go together. Yeah, they do. They came on the bottom, on the top. They were great. But there's a lot of this that we're trying to get to as we grow, is learning how to be better. You know, she's got me to where, I can't wear paisley pants, and those are things that, that was my dad had one pair of paisley pants, and he would put them up for no reason other than to irritate my mother. But, those are the little things that we are in bondage as we're growing, and we're getting out of that. We're getting free, and we're learning how to be Christians that are freed up from that, that pull. There's things that don't pull me anymore that used to pull me a lot. When I was young and running wild, there was things that, man, that's what I want, And those are not the things that I needed, that's for sure. When I was young and single, a friend of mine's mom, she used to tell us, "You're going to find something you don't want, and it's going to stay a lot longer than you can get rid of it." And I went through a few girlfriends, and I figured out that, you know what, I don't want those girls. I don't want the ones that you meet in a bar. There's a reason. Once in a while you get lucky, you meet one in a bar, but there's not very often. Most of the time, if you meet them someplace else, like the girl next door, it's going to make a lot more sense. So she always tells me that I was younger and better looking back then. I said, well, I'm not as young, but everyone is in a different place in that walk. Some are toddlers, just hearing it. Some are teens that are really biting on it a little bit. And some of us are growing, and it doesn't have anything to do with age. I've seen guys that were Christians that were like toddlers that were 60 years old. They're just hearing it for the first time. So what I wanted to kind of get ready for next week was, what are the top 5 hazards and safety tips for Christians? Today we're identify 5 safety topics for the Christian, and how to protect yourself from the world out there, the demons and stuff that are out there. So, number 1 would be hazards. How do you avoid a hazard? First thing they teach us in any kind of mining or construction is hazard identification. So there was I actually use this in one of my classes that I teach. It's a comedy, or a comedian, and he's British. And he's talking about in Britain, very much like the United States. He says, if you have a hole, you got to put up barricades and signs. You got to have everything built up around it. You got to have all this stuff. But in Holland, it's a little different. They got bicycles. They got, you know, people on bicycles with kids in the baskets on their bicycles. They got a dike right there. They got a pathway. There's no handrails. There's nothing there. And he says, it's great. He goes, in England, you know, you come up to it, and somebody says, how did you not fall in that hole? And he says, my mother didn't raise an Indian. I walked around the hole. You know, that's the hazard identification. In Holland, you got, you know, a bicycle, you got a kid, you got your riding down, you got a dike. You know, all of a sudden your tires get wet. Hey, you're in the wrong spot. You got to be over here. You're not in the water. It's just simple hazard identification. Sometimes we've covered up all the safety stuff so much we can't even identify what the hazards are. They put warning labels on TV shows. I just keep coming back to that. But it's good for 13-year-olds. Great, so it should be fine for us, right? You see some of that stuff, and at 13, I didn't know any of that stuff. It's a whole lot different story. How things have changed because a little bit at a time. You know, like I said, the first time was the Lucille Ball show where, you know, they were, I think it was the first time they were in a bed, the first time they showed a mother pregnant was on the Lucille Ball, and it was like, big deal. And now, holy cow, you know, you turn the TV out, you can see anything. And that's on regular TV. You don't even have to turn on HBO or anything like that. So we won't get the pay channels because it's pornography most of the time. But how do you identify those hazards? It's a nail sticking up out of a board. It's that friend that kind of, hey, come on, you know, after work, come on, we're going to go over here. No, thanks, I'll pass. We're all going to go camping this weekend. I got the ice chest. What's in it? You know, is it full of beer or is it full of, you know, ice water? I know years ago, man, we could fill up an ice chest and there was no water in it. You know, we waited for the ice to melt before we had something to drink that wasn't alcoholic. Now I couldn't even, like the old joke says, you know, I get drunk if I walk past a beer sign. So I just I want to stay away from that. But I also want to stay away from the people that are out there like that. Guys I work with. I've got a lot of them I work with, and you know, they're always, well, come on out for the weekend, we're doing this. And I'm kind of busy. You know, I have things to do that don't have anything to do with what you're going to do. The OSHA had a big deal they spent about 3 years and millions of dollars in money, and they had all these big committees come together, and they had to figure out how to put these words together. Part of it was, if you have a hazard and you got a situation, what was the wording they were going to use to do it? It took them 2 years to come up with a hazardous situation. And that was the actual terms, right? Well, we don't need a committee to tell us what a hazardous situation is. That's the biggest thing. We got helmets to protect our heads, right? So what's going to keep stuff out of our brains a little bit? You got guards. We put guards on things like if you got a pulley and a belt, and put a guard there so you don't get your hands in it. And there's always somebody that's going to try to get around that, so you got to make it idiot-proof. Well, that's some of what we got to do is make it idiot-proof for ourselves. We got to make it so that, you know, I'm not going to drink, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm not even going to have alcohol in the house. So I'm never even going to have that temptation to even think about it. And I know that I'm too cheap to go buy liquor anymore. You know, the same way as cigarettes. So I see these people that are spending $100 on a carton of cigarettes. I'm like, you know what I could do with $100 right now? Flying and falling objects. That's when you put yourself in the line of fire. That's where you're just standing there waiting for it to happen. If we put ourselves there, it's going to happen eventually. It may not happen the first time or the 100th time. It may happen the second time, or it may happen the 10,000th time. But if we're standing in the wrong place, doing the wrong things, you know, Like we could go to the local bar and we could preach all day long standing in a bar. Wasn't going to do much good to start with, but what did it do to us when we're standing there? How long is it going to be for somebody to go, well, here, have a drink. You got your little dry there, have something to drink. It's just soda water. Nothing, there you go, it's down that trail. And lastly is carelessness. I had a good friend of mine he spent a lot of time in the military, and he'd always say that carelessness kills. It's that just a little bit, just like we've been talking about, just that little bit. So hazard recognition is the ability to recognize a danger and know how to avoid it, how to keep others away from it, and mitigate the situation. How do we get around those bad spots? I'm sure you're probably thinking right now, what's that bad spot you've been in where somebody wanted you to do something, or you had that ethical question. Somebody offered you a few bucks to do something that you're like, it just doesn't seem right. You know, how many times has that offer been there? And you're like, nah, I think I'll pass. It's just not right. On the job sites that are clearly marked with signs and chains, lights, guardrails, paint, actual guards, all for your protection. But for the Christian, recognition is also there. There's things in there as a Christian we can look for. What's the biggest thing we've got to protect us? Somebody wrote a book, the Bible, right? So we got a book to go. We got this to go to. We got questions, and it makes it easy because you go in the back and go, what about whatever the topic is? And boom, it tells you 4 places to go to. And you can just keep following it. Psalms 119, 9-10 is, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way by taking heed thereto, according to thy word. With my whole heart have I sought thee. I let me not wander from thy commandments. We already know what the right thing is. I always get a kick out of these people that say, well, God's not real because we came from a blob, and somewhere in space something blew up, 2 pieces of dust collided, and it turned into a universe. So, well, that's great. The greatest answer was what they always tell us, well, were you there when God made it? Were you there when the earth, or this 2 pieces of dust blew up? It's about our faith. Well, if God's word isn't real in this, why do we have morals? If God's, why do we have thou shalt not kill matches? You go to jail if you kill somebody, because those are God's morals, and we know what they are. In life, if we didn't have something to guide us, like our Bible, there'd be nothing. If there really was, that everything was just happened by chance, that podium right there, it does not know to stand there. It doesn't know not to jump off. It doesn't know to fall down. It doesn't know anything. Well, we had to figure out how to know things, and there's no way you can tell me that, from a gorilla somewhere, or an ape, we worked all the way up through to where we can figure out how to do, quantum physics. There's a pretty big jump in there somewhere. And I never could, it was always my argument. What's your morals? If you don't believe in God, what morals? Because you don't have a set of rules. It's complete anarchy. Everybody do what they want to do. That'd be a pretty horrible place to be. So the Bible, during lessons and sermons, and then just the Holy Spirit talking to us sometimes. How many times have you had that still quiet whisper in your ear? I was going to go, I don't know, I want to go the other way. That something just doesn't feel right about this. And I think a lot of times that's God giving us that little bit of armor. It's probably built into it. He built it into us. We just got to figure out how to use it. It protects us. That's that helmet that says, hey, don't go those directions, and don't do those stupid things. Remember when I was a kid, we were traveling, going into Oklahoma City. We'd been a brush fire, the smoke came up. Well, it blinded a bunch of people. A whole bunch of cars ended up running into each other. And the next to last one coming up was a semi. And he was coming up, and he was 70 miles an hour, whatever they're doing. And he said, the lady in front of me threw her arms up like this. And I knew there was something wrong. And he slammed on the brakes that he kept from just plowing through, killing probably dozens more people. Well, they interviewed this lady on the news, and they asked her, what was it that you saw that made you throw your arms up? She goes, I wasn't. I was listening to music. It was gospel music. And I went, praise God. And that probably saved all these people. Now, that doesn't happen by mistake. That was God saying, well, we need to stop this right now. And that's where the young man cleanses his way by taking heed to the word. Well, a young man could be just about anybody. We need to listen to the word of God. And that's my problem over the years, is I haven't been really willing to open my ears up as much as I could. Because I can figure that, by golly, that's that shoulders back, head down, and charge. I can take care of this one. I was always the bull of the woods. I could do this. I didn't stop and listen nearly as much. If I'd have stopped a few times, my life would have been a little bit different, I think. I think it would have helped me out in a lot of ways. Looking back on things. But all the hazards and the safety signs, all this stuff is worthless if we don't use it. So I'm going to end it there, and then next week is all about the tools that we can use to help us do that. What to do through